China's number of college graduates has been pretty much a straight line up. It hasn't plateaued yet. It's going to plateau right about nowish. All of this is straight line up. So if you model it out, the number right now, the percentage of college grads in the workforce is something like 20%. In about 25, 30 years, that will get up to 60, 70%.
Wow.
So because you have to be 60, 70, because right now 60, 70% go to college, right? So at one point, you're going to asymptotically approach that. And it will approach that in the year 2045 to 50-ish. So basically, China still has its number of college, working age college people, college grads, will about not exactly triple, but maybe increase 2.5 times from today. So we are still in the beginning phases of China reaching its human capital plateau.
And I want to say, I want to point out, like one of the phenomenon of China's deepening human capital pool is that, in fact, right now there's so many college graduates, the Chinese economy cannot absorb them all. This is actually why there is a high youth employment problem in China right now. It's because all these college students who have invested like their youth to studying hard for Gaokao, for the brutal college entrance exam, then plow through the 4 year of undergrad. When they graduate, they want office jobs. They don't want to go work in factories. I mean, there's still plenty of factory jobs in China, and in fact, there's plenty of high-paying jobs that that just nobody wants. Like there's like I just read a report on Chinese shipping industry, for example. Like right now, the Chinese shipping industry is the global leading. Like the 70% of the new orders of new ships this year is goes to China. China built most of the world ship right now, but the core of China's workforce in shipbuilding, the average age is 41, because the youngins don't want to go working a shipyard. Because even though it's high paying, but you work outside every day. I mean, it's like they don't want to. They don't even want to take the hardship pay, even though it's pretty paid pretty well, and or to be a merchant mariner. It also pays pretty well to be a merchant mariner, but you work on a ship like 8 months of the year. Basically, you are imprisoned on a ship, and so a lot of the college grads, they rather sit in an office, A-seat office, with much less pay than those type of jobs. But they're not as much those office jobs right now that could absorb all these huge college cohorts coming out.
It's a mismatch. It is a problematic mismatch. It's not. I'm pretty sanguine about all this. It's not as problematic as the numbers would suggest, where 15 to 20%, every month it wobbles back and forth in that range, because once you get up to the the next age bracket up is 25 to 29-year-olds, I think the unemployment rate drops down to 7.2%. So what it just means is that these people, they futz around for a few years. They say this job's not good enough, that job's not good enough, this job is working as an engineer in a shipyard, I don't want to do that, I want to be in a design studio, and then they end up, okay, I'm taking that engineering job in the shipyard. So I'm pretty sanguine about that. One of my theories about the high youth unemployment is it's a feature, not a bug. As in, it shows that in China, people can futz around and do not much and travel around. Because we travel around China, we see tons of these young people who are like backpackers all over China for a few years before they get their act together and start working. So it's a feature, not a bug. 25 years ago, they would not be allowed to do this.
They don't have that luxury 25 years ago. They have to earn money for the family. And now the family are wealthy enough to support them to bum around for a few years.
And they do like ad hoc work. They deliver food. They work in youth hostels. They work in these hotels so they can make some pocket money and be unemployed and travel another 6 months. Sooner or later, these guys get their act together. It also leads to situations like a lot of these success cases that you've seen in recent years, like the maker of Wukong video games. He was a complete freaking loser after he failed out of grad school. He was a video game addict, bumming off friends, borrowing money, and then he became a very astute theoretician of video games on the discussion boards. And then Tencent hired him, and the rest is history. The other guy is the director of Nezha. He futzed around. He was supposed to be a pharmacist, and he futzed around making animation, and then he won some animation contest, and then the rest is history.
For people who don't know, Nezha 2 is like the highest grossing animation film of history. and it was started by a guy who was considered like a kind of fail guy who,
all these guys
was bombing around.
And then recently that motorcycle entrepreneur, the story about that motorcycle
ZX Moto. ZX
Moto, and he was like just a wild, weird motorcycle junkie, and then he willed this motorcycle company into existence. And this is the second motorcycle company that he willed into existence. So anyways, you get these now that you're in kind of a higher stage of the economy. You're able to create these. You're able to nurture these more creative entrepreneurs. Of course, not all of them will turn out that way. A bunch of them will continue to be total losers. But we are seeing a lot of examples of things like this happening.
Yeah.
So if you do a comparison of China, a lot of people try to figure out why Japan ran into its decades of lost decades, and they say China might be doing the same thing. Japan hit its human capital plateau in the early 90s, right when its lost decades began. So they were not going to be doubling or tripling their STEM workforce, over the next couple of decades. They just had what they had to work with. It's not a surprise, even if none of the the Plaza Accords or the Japanese bubble if there was no Japanese bubble, if it was handled correctly, growth would not have been the same as it was over the past, of Japan, 20, 30 years prior, because they were still leveling up at that time. So China is still, go ahead.
And also Japanese economy, it was playing catch up with the Western economy up to that moment. And by late 80s and 90s, they have caught up. Their GDP per capita and their quality of living has already reached the same standard of other Western advanced economies. Whereas China today in 2026, I say there's still quite a gap. There's still a lot of room for growth. I agree.
Yeah, so there's quantitative and qualitative differences between China and Japan. Everybody's talking about China lost decades, and growth is still 5%, guys. Growth is still 5%. It's Japan hadn't had 5% for Japanese growth in the 80s was still considered its miracle years. So sometimes these discussions get a little ridiculous when you look at when you look at actual growth in China. It's still 5%. Household consumption is still growing about. It was growing 4.5% last year. It's probably somewhere around 3% right now for the first half. I think a lot of that had to do with the Iran war, where a lot of investment was put on hold. So I don't buy into much of this discussion about how China is at the end of its growth cycle.
Well, what about? Okay, people will say, well, what about the demographic crisis? Chinese people are not having children, so the population going to collapse, and
that is problematic. But nobody quite knows what's going to happen, because the demographic kind of slide down for all countries started sometime around 2015-ish, where all kind of just collapsed for every single country. Now, I have a theory of specifically why China slid down faster than others. One is they pushed college attendance from 5% to 70%. So automatically you're taking out 4 years of family formation right there of young people's lives. So a lot of this family formation will be delayed. You're seeing some of this in South Korea. South Korea had 3 years of pretty high birth rate increases because they are kind of past that point in their education where for many years they were pulling everybody they can into higher education. And now those people are graduating, they've had jobs for a few years, and they are now forming families in their 30s. A lot of it has been delayed into their 30s. And Korea, it was in a population ditch, which is climbing out of. There is a little echo population. So that's one reason why birth rates in Korea are climbing. China as well. I mean, China is also in a population ditch of the 25, 30-year-olds, which there's a hump coming of where it gets higher. So birth rates should, not birth rates, births should climb in the next 5-10 years, because there's this hump of a young population that are currently somewhere around 20 years old. So in the next 5-10 years, that 20-year-olds will cross into their childbearing years. So all this gets, but what will really happen is the working age population will be pretty much steady, falling a little bit until around 2046, and it drops off the cliff. So then the question is, what happens when it drops off a cliff in 20 years? We don't know. There's so much going on in AI and productivity and robotics will that solve the problem? Will we have bigger problems to worry about than just a demographic crisis? It's 20 years out. And it only becomes problematic, not in 20 years, but it becomes problematic in 30, 40 years. So China has something like a 50-year time frame to figure out what to do. Other countries also are in the same problem. They have a 70-year time frame. So they'll be okay for 70 years, whereas China will be okay for 50 years. So
well, I mean, I think we also have Japan. Japan is going to get there a lot faster than other countries. So we can all watch how Japan figures this thing out.
Japan's already there. I mean, Japan's already there. It's already reached its human capital plateau, which has been winding down. So I mean, a lot of people blame Japan about this and that. It's not all that innovative these days just because it just ran out of people. You can't keep, running at that pace. You're no longer adding, it's no longer additive. The people graduating from university is no longer adding to your STEM expertise pool. You're just replacing. You're in a replacement cycle. Yeah. So it's just plateaued.
Actually declining. In Japan's case, it's declining.
Yeah.
In China's case, because relatively fewer people 20 years ago, 30 years ago that had STEM college education, now the human capital is still deepening, even though the population decline has already started, but more people are getting better educated. So from here on for another 20, 30 years, China's human capital is actually growing until it's going to hit the peak, like 2050 or something.
All those trend lines of manufacturing, of scientific papers published, of power, electricity production, all those trend lines have 2.5, 3 decades to run. Yeah. So, people, a lot of people are hoping, I don't know why, but a lot of people who are hoping that China crashes and burns or flattens out. No, sorry. No, it's human capital all the way down. So
it's not going to happen. So sorry. China collapse is not going to happen for at least another 20, 30 years.
Yes. Now, 20, 30 years out, I make no promises. But,
yeah.
But that's when I would start worrying about it.
Yeah. But I mean, I think the difference is like this everything is assuming the current trend continues, right? I mean, like now the Chinese government is obviously already aware this is a problem. They are also trying to adopt policy and measures to fix it, and they have 20, 30 years, to get it right.
I suspect a lot of the work they've done with robotics, encouraging that is and automation is to fix that problem. Also, the Belt and Road Initiative, a lot of it, in contrast to what's in the public opinion, a lot of it is to industrialize the global South and to have them do a lot of the more basic manufacturing, so that China would need less hands.